Marjorie Novak sat in her living room, a shrine to absence. The curtains remained half-drawn, casting long shadows across the worn hardwood floor. Around her, search maps covered nearly every surface, their creases deepening with each passing year. Missing person flyers with the smiling faces of her 3 children, Lena, Silas, and Ivy, were pinned to a large corkboard, the once vibrant colors now faded to ghostly echoes of themselves. She traced her finger along the Ridgeback Trail on the largest map, following the familiar path she'd mentally walked thousands of times since that day in 1998. 7 years of searching had etched permanent lines into her face, aging her well beyond her 49 years. Her once auburn hair had gone completely gray, cut short for practicality rather than style. "They're still out there," she whispered to the empty room, a ritual statement that had long lost its conviction, but not its necessity. Marjorie rose from her chair, wincing at the stiffness in her joints, and walked down the hallway where 3 bedroom doors stood side by side. Each room remained frozen in time, preserved exactly as they had been 7 years ago, Lena's watercolors still pinned to the wall above her desk. Silas's rock collection arranged meticulously on his bookshelf. Ivy's wilderness survival guides stacked beside her bed, a page still marked with a pressed wildflower. She entered Ivy's room first, as she always did during her nightly ritual. The faded comforter still smelled faintly of the pine-scented shampoo her daughter had preferred. Marjorie straightened a photo frame on the nightstand, a picture of the triplets on their 14th birthday, arms wrapped around each other, their identical smiles revealing the deep connection they shared. "I'm still looking," she promised the empty room. "I'll never stop." Before we dive into this mystery from the Pine Barrens, comment where you're watching from today. Are you surrounded by city lights or wilderness like our story's setting? Hit subscribe to join our community seeking answers to the unsolved. The shrill ring of the telephone pierced the silence at 11:47 p.m. Marjorie had been dozing in her armchair, a dog-eared case file open on her lap. She startled awake, her heart immediately racing as she fumbled for the receiver. Late-night calls never brought good news. "Hello?" Her voice cracked with sleep and apprehension. "Marjorie, it's Sheriff Bennett." The familiar voice had aged over the years, just as hers had. "I need you to stay calm for what I'm about to tell you." Her fingers tightened around the phone. "What is it, David? Have you found something?" The pause on the other end of the line stretched into eternity. 2 spelunkers discovered remains in a cave system just off Ridgeback Trail today, he finally said, his tone carefully measured. 3 sets of remains, Marjorie, along with 2 water bottles and a backpack containing a notebook. The room tilted sideways. Marjorie's free hand gripped the edge of the side table to steady herself, knocking over a glass of water. She barely noticed the liquid spreading across the hardwood floor. "Are you saying—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "We can't confirm identity yet," Sheriff Bennett continued, "but given the location and the number of remains, we have reason to believe they might be Lena, Silas, and Ivy." A sound escaped Marjorie's throat. Not quite a sob, not quite a gasp, but something primal that had been building for 7 years. "I've already called the state forensics team," the sheriff continued. "They'll be here at first light. I thought you should know immediately." Marjorie's hand trembled so violently she nearly dropped the phone. "I need to be there," she managed. "Of course. Meet us at the ranger station at dawn." And Marjorie ... Sheriff Bennett hesitated. "You might want to call Anton." After hanging up, Marjorie sat motionless for several minutes, her breath coming in shallow bursts. Then, with mechanical movements, she reached for the address book beside the phone. Anton's number was still there, though she hadn't dialed it in nearly 3 years. Her estranged husband answered on the 4th ring, his voice thick with sleep. "Anton, they found something in the forest." Her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "They think it might be the children." The silence on the other end spoke volumes, then a sharp intake of breath. "I'll be there in 4 hours." The Novak family hadn't always called Alder Creek home. Their story began in Chicago, where Anton and Marjorie had built a comfortable life in a bustling neighborhood. But that life shattered one night in 1988, when armed intruders broke into their home. Though no one was physically harmed, the psychological damage was profound, especially for Marjorie, who had been alone with the 5-year-old triplets when it happened. "We need a fresh start," she had insisted, her hands shaking as she browsed real estate listings for remote locations. Somewhere safe, somewhere they can grow up without looking over their shoulders. Anton, who had witnessed the gradual unraveling of his wife's sense of security, agreed. Within months, they had purchased a modest farmhouse on the outskirts of Alder Creek, population 3,742, nestled against the sprawling Pine Barrens National Forest. The triplets, Lena, Silas, and Ivy, adapted to rural life with remarkable ease. By age 15, they had become as familiar with the forest as they were with each other. Lena, born first by 4 minutes, possessed an artistic soul. Her sketchbooks captured the shifting light through pine boughs and the delicate patterns of frost on morning leaves. She spoke softly but observed everything, often knowing what others needed before they realized it themselves. "Lena sees the world in layers," Anton once remarked, watching his daughter sketch the same tree through different seasons. "She understands that everything has depth if you just look closely enough." Silas, the middle triplet, approached life with methodical precision. His bedroom bookshelf held field guides organized by ecosystem and topic. He carried a compass everywhere and could navigate by stars on the clearest nights. His protective nature manifested in practical ways, bringing extra water on hikes, marking trail blazes with biodegradable tape, ensuring everyone had appropriate gear. "You worry too much," Ivy would tease him, though she secretly appreciated his attention to detail. Ivy, youngest by 7 minutes, embodied fearless curiosity. Where Silas planned, Ivy explored. Where Lena observed, Ivy interacted. She knew the calls of 30 different birds and could identify edible plants in every season. Local rangers had nicknamed her Woodland Sprite for her uncanny ability to move through dense underbrush without disturbing a single branch. Together, the triplets shared a connection that went beyond normal sibling bonds. They finished each other's sentences, experienced similar dreams on the same nights, and developed their own shorthand language of gestures and half-words that only they understood. "It's like they're different parts of the same person," Marjorie once told a neighbor, watching her children move in unconscious synchronicity while setting up a campsite. The triplets' reputation as forest whisperers spread throughout Alder Creek. Locals sometimes sought them out for help finding lost items on trails or identifying mysterious plants. By their 15th year, they knew every ridge, creek, and hollow within a 5-mile radius of their home, or at least they thought they did. June 12, 1998, dawned with picture-perfect clarity. Sunlight filtered through the kitchen windows of the Novak farmhouse as Marjorie packed trail mix into small bags. The end of the school year had arrived, and with it, the family's traditional celebration hike. "Weather report says clear skies all day," Anton announced, folding the newspaper beside his coffee mug. "Perfect conditions for Ridgeback." In the doorway, Silas meticulously checked his backpack. "I've got the first aid kit, extra water purification tablets, emergency blankets, and trail maps. And I've got snacks, sketchbook, and the good binoculars," Lena added, sliding into her seat at the breakfast table. Ivy bounded down the stairs, her hiking boots already laced. "And I packed absolutely nothing because these two always bring everything," she grinned, ruffling Silas's hair as she passed. "One day you'll thank me for being prepared," Silas muttered, though a smile tugged at his lips. Marjorie set a plate of pancakes in the center of the table. Everyone eats a proper breakfast. We've got a long day ahead. Race you to Eagle Rock? Ivy suggested, already reaching for the syrup. You always suggest races you know you'll win, Lena replied, but her eyes sparkled with a familiar challenge. I'll beat both of you this time, Silas declared, straightening his shoulders. Anton watched his children with quiet pride. Remember, we're staying together on the main trail until the first rest point. After that, you three can go ahead to the ridge if you want, but stay within whistle range. The family had developed a simple communication system years ago. 3 short whistles meant, "Where are you?" 2 whistles in response meant, "We're fine, just ahead." 1 long whistle signaled trouble. By 9 o'clock, they were on the trail. The morning air carried the scent of pine sap and wildflowers. Dappled sunlight created shifting patterns on the forest floor as they hiked the familiar path, pointing out new spring growth and animal tracks. At the first rest point, a small clearing with fallen logs arranged in a rough circle, Anton checked his watch. "All right, you three can go ahead if you want. We'll meet at the second creek crossing for lunch around noon. Remember, stay on Ridgeback," Marjorie added. "No exploring off-trail today?" "Yes, Mom," the triplets answered in unison, already shouldering their packs. "Last one to the ridge is a rotten egg," Ivy called, darting ahead on the trail. Lena and Silas exchanged exasperated glances before chasing after their sister, their laughter echoing through the trees. Marjorie watched them disappear around a bend, a familiar knot of worry forming in her stomach despite their experience. "They'll be fine," Anton reassured her, squeezing her hand. "They know these woods better than some of the rangers." Neither of them could have known that this would be the last time they would see their children alive. Their final memory, the sound of fading laughter, and the sight of 3 backpacks vanishing into the green shadows of the pine barrens. By midday, the crystalline blue sky had transformed without warning. Dark clouds rolled in from the northwest, gathering over the pine barrens with unnatural speed. Locals would later refer to it as the Century Storm, a meteorological anomaly that dumped 8 inches of rain in just 3 hours, causing flash floods throughout the region. Anton checked his watch for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. "It's nearly 1 o'clock. They should have met us at the creek crossing an hour ago." Marjorie cupped her hands around her mouth and released 3 short, sharp whistles. They waited, the silence broken only by the first fat raindrops hitting the canopy above. "Maybe they went straight to the cave overlooked to wait out the rain," she suggested, though her voice betrayed her uncertainty. They pressed forward, their pace quickening as the rain intensified. The trail, normally well-defined, began to blur as water coursed down the hillside, turning dirt to mud and obscuring landmarks. At the fork where Ridgeback Trail split, one path continuing toward the ridge, the other descending to a series of small caves often used as rain shelters, Anton stopped abruptly. Something blue caught his eye against the dark earth. Marjorie. His voice was tight as he crouched down, carefully lifting a mud-spattered water bottle from where it lay half-buried in the increasingly soggy ground. She recognized it immediately. The distinctive blue bottle with Silas's hiking club sticker partially visible beneath the mud. Her hand flew to her mouth. Why would he leave his water behind? He never... The sentence hung unfinished as thunder crashed overhead. The rain was now coming down in sheets, visibility reduced to just a few yards. Anton pulled a plastic poncho from his pack and handed it to Marjorie before donning his own. "I'll take the ridge path. You check the caves," he shouted over the downpour. 3 long whistles, if you find them." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of rising panic. Marjorie slipped twice on the treacherous path to the caves, calling her children's names until her voice grew hoarse. Anton returned from the ridge trail with mud-streaked clothes and a deepening dread in his eyes. "Nothing," he reported, water streaming from his sodden hat. No sign of them anywhere along the upper trail. As daylight began to fade, The full gravity of their situation settled over them. Their 3 children had vanished in an increasingly hostile wilderness, with darkness approaching and the storm showing no signs of abating. Anton pulled out his emergency whistle and blew one long, piercing blast, the signal for trouble. In the distance, they heard an answering call. Within 20 minutes, Park Ranger Thomas Wilson appeared on the trail, rain gear glistening in the fading light. "My children," Marjorie gasped, clutching the ranger's arm. "Our triplets, they've disappeared." Night fell on the Pine Barrens with mercurial cruelty, bringing with it a darkness so complete it seemed to swallow even the beams of the emergency search team's flashlights. By dawn the following day, Alder Creek had mobilized in a way the small town had never experienced before. Volunteers from 3 counties arrived in mud-spattered trucks and SUVs, gathering at the ranger station where large maps of the Pine Barrens were spread across folding tables. Sheriff Bennett, then a younger man with fewer lines etching his face, coordinated with state police and park rangers. "We've divided the search area into quadrants," he explained to the assembled group. "Teams will consist of at least 1 experienced forest guide plus 3 to 4 volunteers. Every team must check in by radio hourly." Marjorie and Anton had not slept, their clothes still damp from the previous day's downpour. They stood together yet somehow apart, the space between them already widening with unspoken fears and blame. Search dogs arrived by mid-morning, but the lingering rain had washed away most scents. Helicopters with thermal imaging equipment circled overhead, their rhythmic thumping a counterpoint to the calls of searchers moving through the underbrush. "The triplets are smart kids," Ranger Wilson reassured Marjorie as they followed a team deeper into the forest. If they found shelter during the storm, they'd know to stay put and wait for rescue. But as the day progressed, the search yielded nothing but false hopes and dead ends. The terrain of the Pine Barrens was notoriously difficult. Ravines that appeared shallow from a distance could drop 30 feet or more. Creeks swollen by rainfall had become raging torrents, altering the landscape in crucial ways. Late in the afternoon, a volunteer found a single sneaker wedged between rocks near a stream 2 miles from where Silas's water bottle had been discovered. The shoe, a size 7 with distinctive red laces, matched the description of what Lena had been wearing. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, hope surged through the search teams, but an extensive sweep of the surrounding area revealed nothing more. No additional clothing, no signs of disturbance beyond what the storm had caused, no indication of which direction to pursue. The anxiety these parents felt is unimaginable. If this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button now. It helps our channel reach more mystery seekers like you. As darkness fell on the second day, Marjorie overheard 2 state police officers speaking in low voices near the command tent. If they were still out in the open after that storm with the temperature drop last night. One officer shook his head. "Kids that age, even experienced ones." "We're not giving up," the other replied firmly. "Not until we find them, one way or another." Marjorie turned away, her hand pressed against her mouth to stifle a sob. The unspoken truth hung in the air, like the mist rising from the forest floor. With each passing hour, the chances of finding the triplets alive diminished dramatically. Yet the search continued, flashlight beams cutting through the darkness, voices calling names that received no answer. As days stretched into weeks, theories about the triplets' disappearance multiplied. The official search had expanded to include cave systems, abandoned structures, and even private properties within a 10-mile radius of the Ridgeback Trail. In the Ranger Station conference room, now serving as investigation headquarters, different perspectives emerged. Ranger Wilson stood before a topographical map, pointing to a series of steep ravines. "My theory is disorientation due to the storm," he explained to Sheriff Bennett and the Novaks. "The triplets possibly sought higher ground when the lower trails started flooding. If they climbed here..." He indicated a particularly rugged section. They could have lost their footing in the rain. There are drops of 30 feet or more. The state police investigator, a serious woman named Detective Rivera, had a different theory. "We can't rule out the possibility of a stranger abduction," she said, her voice measured. "The Ridgeback Trail, while not heavily trafficked, is known to locals and visitors alike. The storm could have provided cover for someone who knew the area and was watching for an opportunity." Anton flinched at her words, while Marjorie's face remained stone-like, having already considered every possible scenario, no matter how painful. Outside official circles, local theories took on a more supernatural tone. At the Alder Creek Diner, longtime residents spoke in hushed tones about the Shadow Man, a figure from local legend said to appear during storms, luring hikers away from trails and safety. "My grandfather saw him back in '63, elderly Walter Hayes told anyone who would listen. "Tall fellow, but when you look straight at him, he's just a shadow against the trees. Makes you feel like following him, though you don't know why." The regional media descended on Alder Creek, setting up temporary broadcast points and interviewing locals. The triplets' faces appeared on national news, their story capturing public attention for its unusual aspects. 3 siblings vanishing simultaneously, experienced hikers lost in familiar territory, the mysterious storm that complicated both their disappearance and the subsequent search. With media attention came amateur sleuths and self-proclaimed psychics offering their services. Most were kindly but firmly turned away by Sheriff Bennett, though a few managed to speak with Marjorie, who had become increasingly willing to explore any avenue that might lead to answers. "I saw them near water, but not moving water," one psychic told her, clasping her hands. "A still pool reflecting the sky. They're together, always together." Through it all, the Novaks refused to give up hope, even as official resources gradually shifted from rescue to recovery. The search for Lena, Silas, and Ivy continued, but with diminishing manpower and growing resignation among all but the most devoted volunteers. "They're still out there," Marjorie insisted during a press conference marking the 1-month anniversary of the disappearance. "And we will find them. We will bring them home." The search for the Novak triplets never officially ended, but it changed in nature. Weekend volunteer efforts gradually dwindled to monthly expeditions, then seasonal sweeps of the most promising areas. Each spring, when the snow melted and the ground thawed, hopes would briefly rise that new evidence might emerge from the forest floor. For the Novaks, grief manifested in divergent paths. Marjorie channeled her pain into relentless activism, founding a support group for families of missing persons and lobbying for improved emergency response protocols in national parks. Every Wednesday, rain or shine, she hiked the Ridgeback Trail alone, leaving fresh water bottles at the fork where Silas's had been found. Park rangers, who might have discouraged such behavior in anyone else, tacitly permitted her ritual, understanding her need to maintain connection with the place that had taken her children. Anton, unable to bear the constant reminders, gradually withdrew. His initially fierce participation in search efforts gave way to quiet desperation, then to a hollow resignation. 3 years after the disappearance, he moved to a neighboring town, unable to face the empty bedrooms and Marjorie's unyielding determination, which he had come to see as denial. "I'm not abandoning them," he told her the day he packed his truck. "I'm trying to survive. There's a difference." The annual memorial hike, initiated on the first anniversary of the disappearance, became an Alder Creek tradition. Community members gathered each June 12th to walk a portion of Ridgeback Trail, carrying candles at dusk and sharing memories of the triplets. Marjorie always led these processions, her back straight, despite the growing weight of years without answers. The triplets' story became intertwined with local identity. The high school established a scholarship in their names. A bench overlooking the Pine Barrens was dedicated to their memory. though Marjorie refused to attend the ceremony, insisting it was premature without confirmation of their fate. Time passed with the particular cruelty it reserves for those in limbo, neither able to fully grieve nor to maintain hope without it curdling into something more painful. Days became months, months accumulated into years. The missing person flyers, once refreshed weekly, faded on community bulletin boards, eventually replaced by newer tragedies and celebrations. But in Marjorie's home, time stood still. The calendar remained perpetually open to June 1998. The triplets' rooms were preserved exactly as they had left them that morning, down to the half-read books on nightstands and the shoes kicked off by beds. And in the forest, secrets remained buried, waiting for chance or fate to uncover them. Spring 2005 brought unusually heavy rainfall to the Pine Barrens. Streams overflowed their banks, and the saturated ground gave way in several locations, causing minor landslides throughout the national forest. Cameron Wright and Layla Diaz, amateur spelunkers from the State University, had been mapping lesser-known cave systems in the area for their geology thesis. On April 17th, they were exploring an area just off Ridgeback Trail when they noticed something unusual, a narrow fissure in a hillside where recent rainfall had caused a partial collapse of earth and stone. "It looks fresh," Layla observed, aiming her headlamp at the opening. "The soil around it is still damp from the slide." Cameron consulted their topographical map. "There's no documented cave system in this area. Could be a new discovery." Excitement overriding caution, they squeezed through the narrow entrance, finding themselves in a small antechamber roughly 15 feet across. Their headlamps revealed limestone formations and signs that water had once flowed through the space. "This is incredible," Layla whispered, her voice echoing slightly. "Look how the ceiling arches here. This chamber has been stable for centuries." Cameron nodded, then pointed toward a passage at the back of the chamber. "Let's see where that leads." The passage was tight but navigable, opening after about 20 feet into a second, smaller chamber. As their light beams swept the space, both spelunkers froze. Against the far wall, partially obscured by a fallen rock, lay what was unmistakably human remains. 3 sets of skeletal remains positioned close together in what appeared to be a final embrace. "Oh my God," Layla gasped, instinctively stepping backward. "Are those—" "Bodies," Cameron confirmed, his voice hollow with shock. "And look." His light illuminated 2 water bottles near the remains, one blue and one green, and a weathered backpack half buried in silt. The gravity of their discovery hit them simultaneously. Cameron fumbled for his cell phone, but as expected, there was no signal in the cave. "We need to mark this location precisely and get back to town," he said, forcing calm into his voice. "This is a crime scene or recovery site. We can't disturb anything." They worked quickly to document the location, taking GPS coordinates at the cave entrance and marking the trail with surveyor's tape. Within an hour, they were in their Jeep, driving toward the Alder Creek Sheriff's Station. Sheriff Bennett was completing paperwork when they burst in, faces pale and clothes still bearing the cave's dust. "We found remains in a cave off Ridgeback Trail," Cameron explained breathlessly. 3 bodies, and there were water bottles, a backpack. Bennett's pen clattered to the desk. After 7 years in law enforcement, he had learned to control his reactions. But this announcement sent a visible shock through his system. "Show me on the map exactly where," he said, already reaching for his radio to alert the state forensics team. As the spelunkers pointed out the location, a grim certainty settled over him. After securing the spelunkers' preliminary statement and instructing them not to discuss their finding with anyone, Sheriff Bennett made the hardest drive of his career, the 5 miles to Marjorie Novak's farmhouse, to deliver news that would forever change her life. Dawn broke over the ranger station with somber clarity. Marjorie arrived first, having barely slept after Sheriff Bennett's call. She sat rigidly in a folding chair, clutching a thermos of untouched coffee, her gaze fixed on the trailhead visible through the window. When Anton's truck pulled into the gravel lot, she didn't rise to greet him. 7 years had etched deep lines around his eyes and mouth, and gray dominated his once dark hair. He hesitated at the door, then entered, nodding tersely to Sheriff Bennett before taking a seat across from Marjorie. "You look well," he offered, the platitude falling flat in the charged air. "Let's not pretend this is a reunion," Marjorie replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Sheriff Bennett cleared his throat. "The forensics team from the state lab arrived an hour ago. They're prepping their equipment now. The spelunkers who made the discovery are here to guide us to the exact location." As if on cue, Cameron and Layla entered, looking uncomfortable in the tense atmosphere. They introduced themselves awkwardly, avoiding direct eye contact with the parents of the children whose remains they had likely discovered. "Can you tell us about the cave?" Anton asked, his scientific background asserting itself through his grief. "It appears to be part of a system that wasn't on any of our maps," Cameron explained. "Based on the narrow entrance and lack of documentation, we believe it may have been sealed, or at least partially closed until very recently. The heavy rains this spring probably caused the landslide that revealed the opening," Layla added. "From what we could tell, there was no other way in or out of the inner chamber where we found them." Marjorie's breath caught audibly. "You're saying they were trapped?" The forensic team leader, Dr. Eleanor Chen, joined the conversation. "We'll need to examine the site thoroughly before drawing conclusions, Mrs. Novak. But yes, that's one possibility we'll be investigating." The hike to the cave entrance was conducted mostly in silence. The spring morning was crisp, birdsong punctuating the somber procession of scientists, law enforcement, and parents retracing the path their children had taken 7 years earlier. Ridgeback Trail had changed little, though a few new markers and signs had been added over the years. When they reached the fork where Silas's water bottle had been found, Marjorie paused, her hand automatically reaching for the small cairn of stones she had built there, a marker visible only to those who knew to look for it. "It's just ahead, about a quarter-mile off trail," Cameron directed, pointing to a game path barely visible among the underbrush. As they approached the hillside, Dr. Chen explained how the recent landslide had revealed the cave entrance. "Based on the soil composition and evidence of previous slides, we believe this entire face was likely unstable during heavy rainfall events. Like the storm in '98, Sheriff Bennett murmured. Anton moved closer to examine the hillside. "You're saying this entrance might have been open, then collapsed during the storm." "That's our working theory, Doctor," Chen confirmed. "We'll know more once we've fully examined the interior structure and sediment layers." The cave entrance was now properly secured with evidence tape. 2 technicians had already set up lighting equipment inside the antechamber. Dr. Chen turned to Marjorie and Anton. "I must caution you that what we're about to see will be difficult. The remains have been undisturbed for years. You don't have to enter if you don't feel prepared." "We've been preparing for 7 years," Marjorie said quietly. "We need to see." The forensics team entered first, establishing proper lighting and documenting the scene before allowing Marjorie and Anton to follow. The antechamber was larger than Cameron had initially described, its ceiling high enough to stand comfortably. Limestone formations hung from above, some meeting the floor in columns that had formed over centuries. "This way," Dr. Chen directed, leading them toward the narrow passage. "Watch your step. We've established a path to minimize disturbance of the site." The passage required them to bend slightly, moving in single file through the tight space. The beam of Marjorie's borrowed flashlight trembled against the stone walls as she followed, Anton close behind her. The second chamber opened before them, now illuminated by the portable lights the forensic team had positioned. Despite the preparation, nothing could have readied Marjorie and Anton for the sight that greeted them. In the far corner, partially sheltered by an overhang of rock, lay 3 skeletons. They weren't scattered, as might be expected after years of exposure to elements or animal disturbance. Instead, they remained in a heartbreakingly intentional arrangement, huddled together, the largest skeleton in the middle, with an arm extended around each of the others. Marjorie's knees buckled. Anton caught her elbow, his own face ashen in the harsh light. "They were together," she whispered. "At the end, they were together." Dr. Chen approached the remains with reverent professionalism. Based on initial observation, these appear to be the remains of 3 adolescents, consistent with the ages of your children. We'll need to conduct DNA testing for absolute confirmation, but she didn't need to finish. The personal effects surrounding the remains spoke volumes. 2 water bottles lay nearby, one the distinctive blue that matched what had been found on the trail, the other a faded green with Ivy's Conservation Club logo still barely visible. A backpack, remarkably preserved in the dry conditions of the cave, sat propped against the wall. Inside, protected from the elements, were items that instantly identified their owners: a small sketchbook with Lena's distinctive drawings, a compass with Silas's initials etched on the back, and a wooden pendant carved with an ivy leaf that their father had made for Ivy's 13th birthday. "These are our children," Anton confirmed, his voice breaking. "There's no doubt." Dr. Chen nodded sympathetically. "We'll still need to complete the formal identification process, but I understand. Would you like a moment alone with them?" After the forensics team retreated to a respectful distance, Marjorie approached the remains slowly, kneeling on the cave floor beside what had once been her children. With gentle fingers, she touched the compass, then the pendant. "We found you," she said simply, tears falling freely now. "We finally found you." Anton stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, the other covering his mouth as his own grief overwhelmed him. For the first time in 7 years, they shared the same space, united again by the children who had once been their greatest joy. The moment stretched, filled with the weight of lost years and the strange relief that comes with even the most painful certainty. Then Dr. Chen returned, indicating a small notebook partially visible in the outer pocket of the backpack. "We'll need to document everything in place before removing any items," she explained. "But I thought you should know there appears to be writing inside. It may contain information about what happened." Marjorie and Anton exchanged a glance, a flicker of their old connection passing between them. Whatever answers the notebook might hold, they would face them together. The forensic team worked methodically to document every aspect of the scene. Each item was photographed in position, mapped, and carefully collected for further analysis. The notebook, given its potentially crucial information, received special attention. "The dry conditions in the cave have preserved the paper remarkably well," Dr. Chen explained as she delicately placed the notebook in an evidence bag. "We'll need to examine it in controlled conditions to prevent any further degradation." At the ranger station later that afternoon, Marjorie and Anton waited in tense silence as the forensic document specialist carefully opened the notebook under proper lighting. Sheriff Bennett stood nearby, recording the procedure. "The handwriting changes throughout," the specialist noted, turning pages with gloved hands. "It appears 3 different people wrote in it, taking turns." "They shared everything," Marjorie whispered, "even their journal." The specialist nodded to Sheriff Bennett, who gestured for the parents to approach. "You can look, but please don't touch. We need to preserve all potential evidence." The first entry was dated June 12, 1998, in Lena's neat, artistic script. "The storm came out of nowhere. We tried to get back to the meeting point, but the trail disappeared under running water. Silas thought we should head uphill to avoid flash floods. Found this cave entrance and decided to wait out the rain. It's dry in here, and we have food and water. Parents will find us once the storm passes." The next entry, in Silas's more precise handwriting, was dated the same day, later. Heard a crash outside while exploring the back chamber. When we tried to exit, we found the entrance blocked by debris. Attempted to dig out, but the rocks are too heavy and more dirt keeps falling. No cell signal in here. We have 3 water bottles and enough food for maybe 2 days if we ration. I'm trying to stay calm for Lena and Ivy, but I'm worried. Ivy's bold, slanting letters took over for the next entry, dated June 13th. Silas and I tried digging again this morning. Managed to create a small hole, but couldn't make it big enough to crawl through. Could see daylight, though. Left my water bottle near the opening, hoping someone searching might spot it. The air is getting stale in here. Lena found another small chamber that might have a different way out. We'll explore it tomorrow after resting. The entries continued, alternating between the 3 siblings. Their initial optimism gradually gave way to pragmatic survival tactics, then to growing concern as days passed without rescue. June 15th, Silas wrote, "We're carefully rationing water now, 1 sip each every few hours. Found a small puddle of groundwater in the back chamber. Tastes metallic, but Ivy says it's safe. Temperature dropping at night. We're sleeping huddled together for warmth. Keep thinking we hear voices outside, but when we call out, there's no answer." June 16th, Lena recorded, "Silas is trying to hide it, but he's getting weaker. He gave most of his water to Ivy and me yesterday. I've been drawing maps of all the passages we've found, hoping to discover a way out. My flashlight batteries are dying. We have 1 set left after this." June 17th, in Ivy's increasingly shaky handwriting, "No more water, except what we can collect from the ceiling drips. Lena's been singing to keep our spirits up. I told stories about the stars, even though we can't see them. Silas made us promise that whatever happens, we stay together. Always together." The final entry, dated June 18th, was in Lena's hand, but barely recognizable as her once neat writing. "Can't dig anymore. Too weak." Silas says the oxygen might be running out. He's holding us both now. Ivy fell asleep an hour ago and won't wake up. I think I'll sleep too. Mom, Dad, if you find this, we tried to get home. We love you. We weren't afraid because we had each other. Marjorie turned away, unable to continue reading. Anton stood motionless, tears streaming down his face as he stared at the last words his children had written. "They survived nearly a week in there," Dr. Chen said quietly. "They were resourceful and brave." Sheriff Bennett cleared his throat. "The water bottle found on the trail, it must have been the one Ivy mentioned leaving by the small opening they managed to dig. When the rain continued, that opening must have collapsed again." "They were trying to signal us," Marjorie whispered, "and we were so close. We searched that area repeatedly in those first days. This heartbreaking evidence gives us the answers the Novak family waited 7 years to learn. If you're finding this story as moving as I did, please share it with someone who appreciates true mysteries, and don't forget to subscribe." The state medical examiner completed her analysis 2 weeks after the discovery. Marjorie and Anton sat in her office, the walls lined with degrees and certifications that seemed to offer cold comfort in the face of their personal tragedy. "Based on our examination," Dr. Rivera explained gently, "the cause of death for all 3 was dehydration, possibly complicated by hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, due to the sealed nature of the cave." She opened a folder containing photographs and diagrams. "From the evidence at the scene and their journal entries, we've been able to reconstruct what happened with reasonable certainty." The timeline she presented matched what they had gleaned from the notebook. The triplets had sought shelter in the cave during the sudden storm. While they were inside, likely exploring the deeper chambers, a landslide triggered by the heavy rainfall had sealed the entrance. They survived approximately 5 to 7 days based on tissue decomposition rates and their journal entries, Dr. Rivera continued. The final entry was dated June 18th, which aligns with our estimates. She showed them photographs of the partially excavated area near the entrance. They made multiple attempts to dig their way out. We found disturbed soil and rock along with broken fingernails embedded in the dirt. They nearly reached the surface at one point. Marjorie closed her eyes briefly, imagining her children desperately clawing at the earth, so close to freedom. There are no signs of foul play, Dr. Rivera assured them. No fractures indicating violence, no evidence of anyone else in the cave. This was a tragic accident caused by an unprecedented weather event. Anton leaned forward. Why weren't they found during the initial search? We had teams combing that exact area for weeks. Dr. Rivera nodded understandingly. The geologists believe the cave entrance was completely concealed by the landslide. The small opening they managed to create, where the water bottle was presumably left, was likely covered by subsequent rainfall and natural forest floor accumulation. She showed them a topographical map. Additionally, the cave entrance was in a depression that would have filled with water during the storms that continued intermittently throughout that week. By the time the area dried out, natural debris would have further concealed any opening. "And the search dogs?" Marjorie asked. "Why couldn't they detect them?" "The sealed nature of the cave would have prevented scent from escaping," Dr. Rivera explained. "Additionally, the continuing rain would have washed away any scent trail leading to the area." She closed the folder. "I know this brings little comfort, but your children did everything right under the circumstances. They sought shelter, attempted to signal for help, rationed their supplies, and kept trying to escape until they no longer had the strength. The fact that they were found together, holding one another, suggests they faced the end with remarkable courage and love." Marjorie reached for Anton's hand across the table, the first gesture of connection they had shared in years. "At least now we know," she said quietly. "At least now we can bring them home." The funeral service for Lena, Silas, and Ivy Novak united the entire community of Alder Creek. The high school gymnasium, the only space large enough to accommodate everyone who wished to attend, was transformed with wildflowers and pine boughs gathered from the forest the triplets had loved. 3 simple wooden caskets, crafted by local artisans, stood at the front of the room. Each was carved with symbols reflecting the unique spirit of the child it contained: paintbrushes for Lena, a compass rose for Silas, and intertwining vines for Ivy. Marjorie and Anton sat together in the front row, their shared grief creating a bridge across the years of separation. Former teachers, classmates, and searchers who had never given up hope filled the rows behind them. Sheriff Bennett and Ranger Wilson were there, along with Cameron and Layla, the spelunkers whose discovery had finally brought answers. After the service, a procession wound its way to Ridgeback Trail, where the county commissioner unveiled a new sign. The familiar hiking path would henceforth be known as Novak Memorial Trail, with additional markers warning hikers about weather dangers and the importance of emergency preparedness. In the months that followed, Marjorie channeled her grief into action. With settlement money from a life insurance policy that had remained unclaimed for 7 years, she established the Novak Wilderness Safety Foundation, dedicated to educating young hikers about survival techniques and providing emergency locator beacons to schools and youth organizations. No child should ever be lost in the wilderness without a way to call for help, she told reporters at the foundation's launch. "My children were skilled and prepared, but technology that exists today could have saved their lives." Anton, drawn back to Alder Creek by the discovery, decided to stay. Though he and Marjorie didn't reconcile romantically, they found a new purpose in maintaining the children's memorial together. He accepted a position teaching environmental science at the high school, where he integrated wilderness safety into every lesson. The cave where the triplets had been found was permanently sealed after recovery efforts concluded, marked with a small bronze plaque mounted on a boulder. Lena, Silas, and Ivy Novak, together in adventure, together in spirit. Perhaps the most significant change came in how the Pine Barrens were managed. The Novak case prompted a comprehensive review of emergency protocols. New topographical surveys were conducted, revealing several previously unmapped cave systems. Emergency locator beacons were installed at quarter-mile intervals along all major trails, and weather monitoring stations now provided real-time alerts to hikers' phones when conditions threatened to change. On the one-year anniversary of the discovery, Marjorie hiked the Novak Memorial Trail alone, carrying 3 water bottles, blue, green, and red, which she placed carefully at the fork where searchers had found the first clue 7 years earlier. "They're home now," she told Sheriff Bennett later that day, "and in a way, so am I." The mystery of the Novak triplets had been solved, though the resolution brought both pain and peace. Their story became part of local lore, not as a ghost story or a cautionary tale, but as a testament to the enduring bonds of family and the unpredictable power of nature. For Alder Creek, the memory of Lena, Silas, and Ivy Novak lives on in the safer trails, the emergency beacons that glow softly in the forest dusk, and the annual wilderness safety courses that have potentially saved countless young lives. The Novak triplets' story reminds us how quickly wilderness adventures can turn tragic. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you haven't already, subscribe to Last Seen Stories for more real mysteries that deserve to be remembered. Next week, we'll explore another case that has haunted a small town for generations.